The world has already ended once, just quietly. No explosions, no final announcement. Civilization collapsed in fragments, like ice breaking under slow pressure. Borders no longer mattered, governments became rumors, and survival turned into a matter of who could move, hide, and kill faster. In this frozen wasteland, war never officially stopped. It simply froze in place. Caroline Eth was a soldier long before she became a mother. She had trained for discipline, endurance, obedience. But none of that prepared her for the day she lost her daughter. During a chaotic evacuation years earlier, Caroline was separated from her child in a crowded refugee zone. There were gunshots, panic, smoke, and screaming. One moment her daughter's hand was in hers, the next it was gone. No body was ever found. No proof of death. Only silence. That silence became the reason Caroline stayed alive. Years later, the war had turned into something colder and more desperate. Two sides fought without names, without flags. Supplies were scarce, information even scarcer. One thing, however, was clear. Whoever controlled the remaining energy sources and data networks would control whatever future was left. Caroline was stationed at a remote military base buried in ice. Soldiers lived underground like insects, eating ration paste and sleeping in narrow bunks. The outside world was too dangerous to cross by conventional means. Drones were tracked and shot down. Vehicles triggered mines. Radio signals were intercepted. The ice itself had become the safest road, but also the deadliest. One day, Caroline was summoned by Commander Granvik. He was not a man who wasted words or emotions. His face was carved by years of cold wind and harder decisions. He told her there was a mission that required absolute silence. No radios. No weapons fire. No contact with the enemy. A small team would skate across the frozen archipelago under the cover of night, carrying sensitive cargo to a distant base. If the cargo the fog wrapped around them like a living thing, swallowing sound and distance. Visibility dropped to a few meters, forcing the team to skate closer together than before. Every shadow looked like movement. Every faint scrape of ice sounded like pursuit. They slowed their pace, not from caution alone but exhaustion. Muscles screamed. Breathing burned the lungs. Captain Thomas raised his fist and the group stopped behind a ridge of broken ice. He counted heads. One missing. No one said the name. Saying it would make the loss real. Malik checked their bearings using a small analog compass. Digital tools were useless out here. He whispered that the fog could last hours, maybe longer. It was both protection and a trap. If the enemy was smart, they would wait and listen. Caroline knelt beside the container, adjusting the straps that dug into her shoulders. For a moment, she imagined what might be inside. Some new weapon. A virus. Data capable of collapsing what little order remained. Whatever it was, people were dying for it. That alone made it dangerous. They moved again, slower now, spreading their weight and keeping low. The ice beneath them changed texture, becoming rougher, scarred by old cracks and refrozen wounds. This area had seen fighting before. The ice remembered. Hours passed with no sign of pursuit. The fog thinned just enough for shapes to emerge. Ruins of a coastal town stood frozen in place, half sunk into the ice. Buildings leaned at unnatural angles. Boats were trapped mid-escape, their hulls split open. This was a place people once believed would be safe. Captain Thomas signaled a brief stop inside the shell of a collapsed warehouse. Walls blocked the wind. It was the closest thing to shelter they could afford. They ate ration bars in silence, chewing slowly to conserve energy. Forsberg broke the quiet. He said this place looked familiar. He had passed through here years ago during an evacuation. He said there were civilians everywhere. Families. Child. The base rose from the ice like a scar that refused to heal. Concrete walls were reinforced with metal plating, and watchtowers stood at uneven angles, their silhouettes cutting into the pale sky. Antennae swayed slightly in the wind, whispering signals Caroline couldn't hear. This was the place Granvik had promised. The place where answers were stored like weapons. Enemy soldiers moved in coordinated patterns around the perimeter. They weren't rushing. That worried Caroline more than panic would have. It meant they were confident. They expected resistance. Or they already knew what was coming. Malik crouched behind a jagged ice formation, breathing hard. He whispered that the main gate was sealed, but there might be maintenance tunnels along the eastern wall. Old infrastructure was often overlooked. Caroline nodded. Every step closer to the base felt heavier, not from fatigue but from fear of what she might find inside. They waited until a patrol passed, then skated low and fast, using shadows cast by broken towers. The ice here was thick, reinforced by layers of refrozen melt and debris. Explosions had reshaped the land, turning it into a maze of cover and traps. A sudden crack echoed behind them. Malik staggered. His skate blade had caught a fragment of metal hidden beneath the ice. He fell hard, pain flashing across his face. Caroline dragged him into cover as footsteps approached. Enemy voices carried through the cold air. Close now. Malik clenched his jaw and tried to stand. His ankle twisted uselessly beneath him. He shook his head. He didn't need to say it out loud. Caroline already knew. He pressed a small device into her hand. A map chip. It contained schematics of the base, stolen months ago and memorized in pieces. He told her the tunnel entrance was marked. He told her not to argue. Then he did something she didn't expect. He smiled. He said if she found her daughter, she should tell her that the world had tried to break them, and failed. Before Caroline, night reclaimed the ice, stretching shadows across the ruins of the base. The fire behind Caroline painted the sky with dull orange light, a brief warmth in a world that had forgotten heat. She didn't look back again. Some places were meant to be left burning. Her body was breaking down. Blood soaked through her sleeve from a graze she barely remembered getting. One skate blade was chipped, throwing her balance off. Every push forward sent pain through her legs, but stopping meant freezing. Stopping meant death. She followed the coordinates burned into her memory. A civilian shelter inland, far from the front lines. It wasn't a promise. It was just the last known location. In this world, that was everything. The ice thinned as she moved away from the archipelago. Snow replaced glassy surfaces, slowing her pace. Wind howled openly now, no walls or ruins to block it. Caroline wrapped her arms tighter around herself and skated on, guided by instinct and desperation. At some point, she collapsed. Not dramatically. Just a quiet failure of muscles. She lay on her side, breath shallow, eyes half closed. The cold crept in gently, almost kindly. She thought of Malik's smile. Of Thomas's eyes when he made his final decision. Of all the names she would never know. Then she thought of her daughter. She pushed herself up again. Hours later, long after she should have fallen unconscious, Caroline saw lights. Real lights. Steady and warm, glowing through the snowfall. The shelter wasn't a myth. The compound was surrounded by fencing and makeshift defenses. Armed guards moved cautiously, not in military formation but with the nervous alertness of people protecting something fragile. When they saw Caroline stumble forward, they raised weapons, shouting for her to stop. She dropped to her knees instead. Hands grabbed her, dragged her inside. Voices blurred together. Someone pressed cloth against her wound. Warmth flooded her body so suddenly it made her cry out. She hadn't realized H.